I'd like to thank everyone for giving me this opportunity to speak, and also I'd like to welcome everybody here tonight. Tonight I'd like to speak generally on Buddhism. Particularly I'd like to touch upon the Mahayana practice known as developing enlightened mind, bodhicitta. Generally speaking, now to explain such thing logically, that when we speak about that Buddhism is based upon benefiting oneself and that of other is not only human being, but even every animal, insect, and so forth. Generally, that all those beings who have motivation, wish to be separated from very much pain, suffering, all those beings who long to experience happiness. And therefore, if we look from the logical viewpoint, that it's not only self or we as a human, but that even in animal beings, that there is no one who don't want to be separated from the pain, who desires pain. And there is not a single being who is not longing, wanting or craving for happiness. Having understood that, it's not only we long for the happiness and want to get rid of, separate from the suffering. So therefore we need to aim, work on this betterment of every living being or every sentient being, to provide happiness, to separate them from pain and suffering. That whole idea of Buddhism is really based upon benefiting oneself, benefiting for others. So it is really based upon or aimed. The purpose is being working to benefit self and that of the both for others, all beings. So therefore, as again explained, that Buddhism aims toward the liberating all beings, particularly in this of the Mahayana Buddhism, that in addition to wanting to liberate all sentient beings, there is emphasis more put upon this altruistic attitude, the enlightened mind. Now, in order to do so, that we have to again understand general situation of all living beings, that every being experiences many pain, suffering. The reason, the root cause of why we are undergoing experience of the many type of suffering is really due to the lack of contentment and lack of dissatisfaction, due to the lack of satisfaction, And as such, that dissatisfaction leads us to experience over and over, again and again, pain and suffering. And as a result, we have a tremendous clinging, grasping to everything, and due to this clinging and grasping, we experience over and over again dissatisfaction. Whatever even we obtain, it is not sufficient to feel, to satisfy our mind, and as a result to such, that there is no end to this pain or suffering. So therefore, so we constantly experience the dissatisfaction due to lack of contentment. If we learn to be content with whatever we have without craving and grasping to furthermore, then that is what we are talking about, the contentment, and so such thing is possible. But at present, the whole idea of the pain, or rather suffering, we take that suffering also something coming from externally. And therefore, not understanding the very root cause of the suffering, which is clinging. Not understanding very root cause of the suffering, which is the clinging or grasping of the inner mind, we think that the remedy to prevent that very suffering is also we have to obtain some remedy from externally. So we take the suffering as also external and the remedy as external, and therefore in search of such that always externally that we do not find the perfect solution to overcome or liberate from very pain and suffering, and as such we are unable to experience any satisfaction of the mind. So as such that we have been over-concentrated upon external objects, external circumstances, that even externally we are able to obtain enough wealth or possession, so to speak, that does not satisfy our inner mind, and furthermore we again experience that dissatisfaction of pain and suffering. So actually the real aim should be put into our mind, which is to cut through, to get rid of our clinging and grasping, and therefore experience some sense of satisfaction of what we have, what we are. So therefore that Buddhism is aimed towards the concentrating, pacifying one's inner mind. Particularly, we have developed a notion of the dualistic idea. And as long as we have this dualistic idea, if you ask, does the outer manifestation, is it any outer circumstance is related to our inner suffering? Yes, there is interdependence, but all outer circumstances does not actually cause. It is not the root of suffering. They are interdependence of everything that we experience in the outer circumstances. So therefore, to give actually furthermore the correct, more accurate and precise meaning of Buddhism. In our own language, Buddhism is known as inner, nangpa, which is inner. Inner does not convey the meaning of inner being or outer being, but inner conveying that the practice is very much aimed toward the inner, pacifying that dualistic mind of self and other, and therefore in pacifying that dualistic mind, concentrating very much innerly, and so therefore experiencing the sense of satisfaction from not craving, longing for more, and not concentrating externally is actually known as Buddhism or Nangpa. So therefore that Buddhism Buddhism suggests that one try to watch inner mind, so to speak, or internally, so that turning inward rather than turning outward, one can then able to overcome that very dualistic mind, the grasping or clinging. In that manner, one try to understand that our mind clings to the object or external object. The external object does not cling or grasp to our mind. So therefore, it is really that mind we have to train. Because external object cannot cling to our mind, they are inanimate. Our mind is something that really clings. So we have to learn now, or understand according to Buddhism, what is the very root of that clinging or grasping. The very root of our clinging or grasping is again first, clinging to the idea of existing self, or you can call me, I. labeling that very fixation of existing of me, I, that is the very root of all clinging, which caused you to furthermore cling to the other ideas of existing of others and so forth. So one has to work with that very ego or that of the self-fixation, and therefore working with that, it is always known as working towards the selfless nature according to Buddhist terms. So when you get the whole idea of needing to get rid of the self, clinging to the idea of self, now that to avoid clinging to self is not really a simple matter. It's not a simple matter like putting a cup away or taking off your coat or jacket. It's not that simple matter of getting rid or avoiding the self, the idea of the selflessness. So therefore, since it is not a simple case to get rid of or avoid that very clinging to this fixation of existing of I or self or ego, if you like to call it. In Buddhism, it provides many methods. First, the intellectual method. And intellectual method, in a sense, you develop some sense of understanding. You try to find out the very self, very ego that you feel you exist, where it is, which location of the body it is, inner or outer, what form that ego you call as I it is, what shape, what color. That is taught through the intellectual means, and when one tries to contemplate with one-pointed concentration, so to speak, to find that very I or self in all matter of form, shape and color, you do not really find the I that you thought it exists. However, that is not enough. The intellectual understanding is not enough to get rid of. So therefore, as you might be familiar, in Buddhism, everybody emphasizes the meditation very often, so one need to really apply the technique of meditation to overcome the clinging and grasping towards the existing of I. So when we speak about meditation, there are many forms of meditation. Out of so many forms, method of meditation that is available, the one that is very practical, one that is seen to be very effective, outstanding of all the form is the Mahayana technique of the meditation, particularly cultivating, developing loving kindness and compassion. In addition to that, there is a technique or meditation in the Mahayana, what is known as exchanging self with other. So why this path, what is known as in Mahayana, Tonglen, and to translate such is giving and receiving practice is more effective, is that earlier we talked that the whole idea of Buddhism is to experience the selfless nature or egoless state. Suppose if you sit there and think, I, self does not exist, and meditate upon it, it may not be very effective form to actually detach yourself from the grasping of the fixation of existing of I. Simply sitting there. You're simply sitting there with the idea I does not exist, but then actually realizing that very form of I does not exist or not forming in yourself. You still have the grasping of self-existing, and you still probably have the self-cherishing. So since you have self-cherishing still, that's why the Mahayana Buddhist form as Tonglen, or the giving and receiving, is more effective or outstanding, is that in whole idea of a Tonglen is that you give all your happiness, joy, prosperity to other. You receive their problems, weakness, error, and illness. So therefore here, you're actually letting go of self-cherishing and making cherishing for others. So you're at least letting go of self, grasping from self for a moment when you let go of your happiness. So there is a practice form of loosening yourself.
The challenge must
From loosening yourself from very much clinging, grasping to existing of self or self-cherishing. So it is a big challenge for oneself to really accept the whole idea of not existing self or not cherishing. We have self-cherishing, so therefore whatever is self becomes my or mine. I and mine becomes very close to you. Whatever seems to be other, distant from you. And therefore that when we talk and explain things logically from the intellectual viewpoint, explaining the non-existence of self, and if you sit there, meditate on the non-existence of I or ego or me, it becomes quite simple practice because you simply think I does not exist. It has no really effort necessary, and it doesn't harm you simply thinking I does not exist or me does not exist. It becomes very relaxing meditation. But when this exchanging, or rather giving and receiving practice comes, it becomes quite troublesome many ways. At the beginning, because when you're giving all your happiness, virtue, and prosperity, so to speak, sometimes you hesitate and think, am I losing all my happiness to the other people? So that hesitation, that barrier, their doubt rises. At the same time, in the practice of the Tonglen, as we have explained earlier, you take upon yourself the pain, suffering, misfortune, illness of everybody. And when you're taking, you hesitate. And in addition to that, again, meditation on a very selfless nature becomes quite comfortable and simple because through simply logical reasoning, and if you could sort of put your mind, and you can put your mind to the understanding, to the inference and so forth, logic that I does not exist, but maybe the realization of not existing, or rather the detachment from the grasping is not really occurred in your mind. Only you're believing, another belief on top of what you believe is I does not exist or self does not exist. And so in the idea of this giving and receiving practice, which again is why it's so effective, is whether it's sincere or not really depends on personal practice. You have to be sincere in wanting to take the suffering, pain of others upon yourself, and also wanting to provide happiness. But even that, so that in addition to such, that you do have to make an effort of giving and receiving effort on top of such. So that very idea of letting go or sharing your happiness and taking upon the pain and unfavorable state of other upon yourself itself is really a great practice to let go or surrender the ego, clinging. So therefore that the purpose of why I have said earlier that the practice of this Mahayana Tonglen, giving and receiving, the cultivation of bodhicitta, which is developing loving kindness, compassion, is beneficial for self and other both, is that when you practice like that, giving and receiving practice, it did not only help you to really accept and develop a compassion upon other, but also cut through this dualistic idea and cutting through the very ego clinging or ego grasping or ego clinging, which is the very root of your own pain and suffering. Having cut through that very ego clinging, then you have also developed a better, more solid and genuine loving kindness and compassion, and you could be more effective, active on actually benefiting, liberating others. So therefore, this very technique of Mahayana practice of the Tonglen giving and receiving is of tremendous benefit for self as well as for others. So this practice of giving and receiving, again, is not simply helpful to cut to our ego clinging, to cut to the dualistic idea. It not only simply increases the capacity to benefit living beings, but it is of a very benefit in our daily life, every day's activity. If you cultivate such a giving and receiving practice upon your life, how does this very practice of giving and receiving help us in daily activity? So is that in our life we do not experience same level every day. We experience ups and downs. Sometimes things seem to be going very well, and therefore sometimes we experience happiness. On the other time, nothing goes right at all, and everything seems to be very disappointing and painful. As such, a result to that, everything is painful. And as a result to those difficulties or hardship of ups and downs, not having any practice such like this applied to oneself, some experiences mental defect, imbalance of mind. But if one has applied such practice of giving and receiving, whatever situation one occurs of ups and downs, one is able to handle that in same level without being affected by various situations, but you are able to handle the ups and downs of your life. Not only that, everything around you, all around your environment becomes quite comfortable in your life. Living comfortably, gently, more positively and with kind-hearted as giving and receiving applies. The beings who are around you, they too experience that gentleness, comfort of peace and happiness in you. So you're not again that in your daily life experiencing that practice internally, but it is also very much effective externally. Now as such, in Tibetan we have a proverb which says that if you have a kind heart, everything in your life, the practice, the material work will go smoothly by the outcome or by the result of your kind heart. That is Tibetan proverb. So it also suggests such that the giving and receiving practice, which is aimed toward being good, kind to others, is very important. In addition to that, Buddhism emphasizes upon the whole idea of Buddhist practice is to experience the ultimate state of all phenomena. The ultimate state of all phenomena being emptiness, or in Sanskrit, shunyata state. Now, emptiness or shunyata cannot be experienced at all with the lack of loving kindness, compassion. I can guarantee every one of you that with the lack of compassion and loving kindness, regardless of what you try, that you can never experience emptiness or shunyata. Shunyata is experienced to the pure, very strong cultivation of loving kindness, compassion, which this loving kindness, compassion is known as bodhicitta or enlightened mind. So, in the practice of, again, the loving kindness or bodhicitta, how we do really experience shunyata, the emptiness state, is that, as we have explained earlier, in the sense of love, compassion, you practice the giving and receiving. As you develop, again, a deep sense of love and compassion, then you learn to understand that all the eternal phenomena are not solid, real, concrete. And particularly, at the beginning, you also sort of detach from the grasping to the existing of self, or ego, or I, as we have talked earlier. With that, then you also understand outer phenomena do not really exist solidly, concretely. And that grasping to the existing of outer phenomena is also eliminated, As earlier to that, you have detached from the self-clinging or to the idea of existing of self. So when you get to the point of detaching from the existence of self and that of the phenomena, then you get to the point. You do not get into the two extremes, but to the beyond eternalism and nihilism. And as you get beyond very much eternalistic idea and nihilistic idea, that is very much shunyata. You experience by, again, having developed a pure, sincere sense of loving kindness, compassion upon yourself. So the whole idea of the realizing emptiness means that you're getting beyond the grasping to the existence of reality, beyond the idea of is, beyond the idea of is not, beyond the idea of real, it is real, and beyond the idea of it is not real. When you get beyond that, very grasping to that it is real or it is not real. Grasping to so when you get beyond the whole idea of the existing or non-existing. Suppose if you cling to the idea of it is exists, then it is not exist is the opposite to it is existing. If you take the truth or believe in it is not existing, then existing is the opposite to it is not existing. So you get beyond that whole idea of very grasping to the it is exist or it is not existing, beyond both of them. Having gone that is really the whole idea of understanding the shunyata or realizing the shunyata. And within that, having understood the shunyata, then the unobstructed nature of compassion and loving kindness manifests. Having understood the real shunyata. And because of that strength of the unobstructed nature of the loving kindness, compassion, that's the whole meaning of Buddha activity being ceaseless. That Buddha activity being ceaseless or endless, unobstructed, is that having come to the ultimate realization of the shunyata or emptiness, that it has built a completeness of loving kindness and compassion, which is explained as an unobstructed nature. That the very activity or Buddha activity that benefits living beings now becomes very effortless, natural. So that level of the emptiness, when you come to realize that very shunyata, when you have totally, completely also developed the loving kindness, compassion, it is known as the union of compassion and emptiness. And that is very much emphasized in the Buddhism to develop such, and in order to do so, that the meditation is applied upon oneself, so to speak, to actualize that level or to that. And it is required, the very meditation is required in the Vajrayana practice also. And that is very basic, that is very heart of Buddhism, which is which is explained in the Tonglen or giving and receiving, to experience that level of ultimate state of shunyata or enlightenment. If you have any questions, you're welcome.